video will give you instructions on metallography, how to grind your samples. First, I'm going to show you how to turn the machines on. We have two different grinding machines, a newer one on the right and the older one on the left. The older one has a power button on. The lights will come on. Then for the water, you turn it on, and water should then start coming out the nozzles. When you hit run, the wheel will begin rotating, and the RPM is set here at 10, so I can raise that up by hitting the up button. Now the wheels are rotating and water is flowing. The volume of the water is controlled with a knob in the back here. The newer grinding wheels, the water is turned on here, and water should then begin flowing out the nozzles. The volume of the water here is controlled with this knob. To control the wheels, I turn it on here. But if I hit this and the wheels don't rotate, this is because it's waiting for a time. Instead of putting a time in, just turn the timer off, then hit run, and then the wheels will begin to rotate. The RPM on this machine is set with this dial here. Accessories for grinding are in the drawers below the grinders. The first drawer has grinding paper, 240, 320, and 400, and a manual with written instructions. And the second drawer has the higher number grits, 600, 800, and 1200. The grinding paper is labeled on the back what the grit is, and higher grit numbers refer to smoother paper. These grit papers have an adhesive back which you pull off, and then it will stick to the steel plate. Smooth down. Once you put grinding paper on the wheel, you should label with labeling tape what the grit is of the grinding paper. The grit size refers to the number of lines per inch in a sieve that would allow these silicon carbide particles to pass through. So 600 lines per inch are going to let larger particles pass through the sieve than 800 lines per inch. So these silicon carbide particles are smaller, and you can look up in charts the conversion. We begin with 320 generally for a sample, move through to 400, 600, and finally 800 in grinding. Here is the first sample we're going to grind. Notice I'm wearing gloves because you can grind your hand on the grinding wheel. So here's how you hold your sample. The first thing actually you want to do is to use the roughest paper you have and grind down these rough edges so they're smooth and you don't risk cutting yourself on the edge. That includes the front and the back of your sample mount. Okay, Now the way you hold your sample is you pick a certain orientation, say the face is parallel to the wheel, and you hold the sample like this with one hand to keep it from moving with the wheel, and you use your other hand to then apply a small force. The amount of force is 5 pounds, and there's a Toledo scale in the chemical engineering lab if you want to get a sense of how much 5 pounds is. It's not very much. The grinding paper does all the work, grinding away a layer. And we want to keep the orientation of our sample consistent for each grinding grit. So at 320, I'm always facing with my sample like this to the wheel. But I may have a tendency to have a bias towards one side or the other, so every minute or so I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. Hold it from rotating with the right hand and then apply a small force with the left. Look at your sample, rotate 180 degrees. Now that I'm familiar with the hold, I'm going to up my RPM to 200. Just to speed things up. You want to continue at this grit until your sample is plain or flat. When you think it's plain, we're going to rinse this off and go look at it in the microscope. The rinse procedures begin by just taking your sample and allowing running water to wash over it and remove the grit from the sample. You can't really see grit, but it's microscopic and you want to get it off there before you go to your next sandpaper. After washing with water, you want to go to the hood and dry with alcohol and air. You can use tongs to grab hold of your sample, rinse with some alcohol to dry off the water, and then the orange air will dry the alcohol anytime. At the end of the grinding counter is a microscope to view your metallographic sample as you prepare it. The power is here in the back. The light should come on. This microscope is old and a lot of things are broken, but it still works for this purpose. So you place your sample here and you turn the focus knob until the lens and sample are close together while you're watching them. And then you look through the eyepiece and turn the focus towards you. This moves the sample away from the lens while you're looking in the eyepiece to focus. Eventually you will get to a focus and you can see your grit lines. If you need to move the sample vertical, this knob will allow you to view the whole surface by moving the stage. Unfortunately, the stage horizontally is broken, so you just have to position that with your sample lined up vertically and then use this to view along the vertical dimension. Okay, so after grinding at 320 for a while, I have a surface that's flat or plain. And when I look in the microscope, I see these lines where the grit has scratched, all in the same direction, horizontal. And so I'm concluding I'm ready to move on to the next grit.